blood moon rose slow and heavy, like an old god peering over the edge of the earth. Its red light soaked the pines of Grimridge Hollow, turning every branch into a claw, every shadow into something watching. Wolves did not howl tonight. They held their breath, because the pack's time had come to choose a new alpha hand. There would be no mercy. High atop the hollow's black stone altar stood Darius Vaughan, the Alpha King. He was older than anyone remembered. Older than bones. Older than memory. His fur had gone silver white, streaked with battle scars and smoke markings from rituals long abandoned. His breath was shallow now, chest rising with effort, yet his presence still crushed the air around him, bending even the wind into silence. Below him, the pack gathered, 100 strong, fur and fang, eyes like fire, warriors, mothers, loners, and pups barely able to shift. They had all come to witness the end of an era. Darius raised a clawed hand. The whispers stopped. He spoke with a voice that rumbled like thunder through the marrow. The throne must bleed to live. The wind howled through the trees as if answering. I carried the crown through 100 winters, through wars, betrayals. I bled for this pack, and you bled with me. But now my blood fades. A long pause. The pack stood frozen in the hush. A new alpha must rise. He turned slowly, gazing down upon the 6 wolves he had called forward, each one standing on a separate stone, marked with the runes of the first hunt. Not chosen by birth, not chosen by love, chosen by claw and survival. A sickle-shaped blade, carved from obsidian, rested beside him. Darius lifted it. The gauntlet will decide. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some stepped back, others trembled with anticipation. The rite of ascendancy hadn't been invoked in over 300 years. 6 will enter, only 1 will leave. The path is sacred, the rules are eternal. No alliances past duskfall, no mercy, no escape. He stabbed the blade into the earth. Red mist poured from the wound in the soil, crawling like fog down the altar steps. The ground beneath the contenders glowed with ancient glyphs, pulsing to the beat of something older than the moon. The stones opened beneath them, not falling, but descending. A hidden path, a sealed trial. Darius turned toward the sky, the moon reflected in his eyes. The gauntlet begins at Moonpeak. He looked at the 6, no pity, no love, only command. Ronan, Cain, Leora, Tovak, Vera, Drex, you carry my legacy now. Survive, Etor, die, feeding the hollow. His voice cracked once, not from weakness, from truth. The next alpha shall rise, not by might alone, but by fate's own hand. And with that, the great alpha collapsed. His body finally giving in, his spirit rising in smoke and ash that swirled into the crimson sky. The hollow fell silent. Only the wind moved, whispering through the pines as the 6 contenders vanished into the dark, into the gauntlet and to legend. The descent was soundless. The stone beneath their feet moved like breath, lowering them into the earth. The deeper they sank, the less the blood moon's light reached the mental. Only its memory remained, a red smear behind closed stone. Ronan kept his eyes forward. He could feel the others beside him. 6 hearts, 6 killers. He hadn't seen them in years. Some not, since the last war. They were all different now. Changed by time, changed by hunger. The tunnel opened at last, into a clearing wide, damp, and dimly lit by fungus glowing along the roots of the hollow. The ceiling arched high above, cathedral-like, made of intertwining branches and rock, ancient, sacred. A single massive obelisk jutted from the center, etched with hundreds of claw marks. The sight of first blood. They knew what it meant. No words were needed. Each contender spread out, instinctively, forming distance, feeling the moment tighten like a snare around their throats. Ronan glanced at them one by one. Cain, towering and twitching, with crimson tattoos curling down his neck, his breath steamed even in the cold. He was grinning like a dog already tasting blood. Leora, silent and sharp-eyed, watching everything. Her fingers brushed the carved bone necklace at her throat, the heirloom of a fallen bloodline. Tovak, muttering to himself, one eye milky, the other glowing green, the bony, outcast mystic who claimed to dream with spirits. Vera, scarred and lean, her jaw set like stone. She'd once been Ronan's second during the border massacre. Now she wouldn't even meet his eyes. Drex cloaked in silence, expression unreadable. The only one never seen in human form, born in the woods, raised by something older than law. No one knew if he'd ever spoken. They stood in the clearing like 6 statues of war. Then, without warning, the obelisk flared with red light. A pulse, then another. Faster, the air warped with heat. Symbols flared to life around the chamber floor, glyphs marking the paths. 6 routes, 6 trials. Cain barked a laugh and took the leftmost path, not waiting, hoped to kill at least 2. Before moonfall, he muttered, already shifting as he sprinted into the dark. The others hesitated, then, one by one, they vanished each into their chosen route, each swallowed by the gauntlet. Ronan remained. For a moment, he couldn't move. Something felt wrong, not in the air, but in his bones. He remembered the voice of his father, not as a king, but as a man, whispering to him the night before his exile, "The gauntlet doesn't test strength, it tests soul, and the hollow. It listens." Ronan's path was carved with a spiral of lunar symbols, the same ones that had haunted his dreams since childhood. He stepped forward, and the tunnel took him. The path twisted like a serpent, narrowing with every turn. Roots scraped his shoulders. His breath came fast, not from fear, but something worse, familiarity. He'd been here before, years ago, as a boy. He'd chased a dying deer into these woods during his first blood hunt. It had vanished. He'd sworn he saw a wolf standing upright in this very spot, but none had believed him. That night, the elders forbade him to speak of it. He was 8 years old now. Here he was again, and this time, the hollow welcomed him back. A growl echoed from somewhere ahead. Not Cain, not any of the others. Deeper, lower, like an echo from the earth's stomach. Ronan paused, shifted, his bones cracked, hair erupted across his arms, claws stretching from his fingers. His breath steamed in the chill. Something was waiting for him, and it wasn't one of the 6. Ronan's breath clouded in the air, like smoke from a fire that hadn't yet started. The tunnel ahead pulsed with dim red firelight. The deeper he went, the more the walls bled warm, like a body inhaling him. The symbols carved into the stone whispered, not aloud, but in rhythm, in memory, in pulse. He could hear it now. His heartbeat wasn't alone. There were 2, and the second didn't belong to anything living. The corridor broke open suddenly into a hollowed cavern overgrown with moss, vines, and bones. A shrine stood at its center, stone wolves in a circle, each one missing its eyes. Their sockets were filled with claw-marked stones, glowing faintly blue. Above them, the sigil, the spiral moon, the same shape carved into his dreams. The same one his father had once burned into his shoulder the night he was banished. Ronan stepped forward slowly, the tips of his claws scratching the dirt behind him. The tunnel closed with a sound like breath being held. The shrine's light flared, and that's when the voice came, not human, not bestial, but ancestral. "You should not have returned," Ronan spun. No one was there, but the air vibrated, and his skin crawled, as if something stood just behind his soul. The ground cracked, and something rose from it. Not a wolf, not a man, a shape tall and shadow-thick, stitched from smoke and old fur, crowned in antlers, dripping rot and memory. Its face was nothing, just teeth and flame. Ronan staggered back. His instincts screamed to shift, but something inside him rebelled. His vision blurred, his knees buckled. The voice spoke again inside his skull. "The gauntlet remembers, so does the blood. You were marked at birth, you were spared before. There is no second mercy." Ronan's body gave in, bones snapped, skin tore. He fell to all fours, convulsing. As the change began, it wasn't like before, not the controlled shift he'd learned under the moonlight as a boy. This was the old kind, the kind that came screaming through bone marrow, dragging screams behind it. His spine lengthened, claws burst from fingers, fur tore from flesh, then returned. His jaw cracked, split, and reformed into a snout drenched in saliva and pain. He screamed as his ribcage broke and reshaped. His tailbone erupted into furred muscle. The shrine's stones pulsed faster with every change, reacting, feeding. The hollow remembers, the voice hissed. The transformation completed. Ronan knelt now, fully wolf, chest heaving, fur slick with sweat and blood. And the thing across from him was gone. Only the shrine remained. The statues now stared, eyes empty, but glowing brighter. He understood the truth now. This wasn't a trial, it was a return. A return to what they once were before they called themselves Pack. Before they had law, before the gift of the moon became a curse they could shape. This place it peeled back every veneer. It didn't care for the titles of Alpha, Heir, or Son. It only remembered the monster. Ronan turned and bolted through the next tunnel, breath ragged, claws digging into the dirt. Mind spinning. Somewhere, he could feel the others, fighting, bleeding, dying, and the Hollow was watching all of it. Far from him, in another arm of the Gauntlet, Leora crept through a narrow cave overrun with glowing spiders. She moved like smoke, silent, but her eyes burned. She'd seen Drex pass through a ritual chamber 5 minutes earlier. She hadn't followed, she'd left him a gift, a silver snare, dipped in salt and shadow root. Laced across the floor like a vine, she heard the sound now wet. Abrupt, a howl, cut short, then silence. She allowed herself one breath of satisfaction. Only 5 remained. Elsewhere, Kane stood over Tovak's body. Panting, claw dripping with marrow, Tovak hadn't begged. He'd simply whispered something as Kane drove the claw in. The Hollow already chose. Kane hadn't cared. He didn't kill to win, he killed to purge. He stood now in a room filled with mirrors. Each one showed him a different form: alpha, boy, beast, corpse. He shattered them all with a roar. But only Ronan felt the pulse underfoot. The Gauntlet was awakening, not because of who they were, but because what they were becoming. The moon had fully risen overhead, but in the Gauntlet, there was no sky, only the memory of it. Ronan stumbled into a chamber carved with old runes, spiral moon symbols, fangs locked in eternal circles, wolves with no eyes howling into the void. The walls bled mist, and the floor was made of black glass that rippled with every step. At the center stood a pedestal. On it, a book, bound in pale leather, clawed open, still bleeding. He approached slowly. His claws clicked against the stone. The runes whispered with every breath he took, but it was the book that called him. A scent he couldn't ignore, like burned fur and memory. He opened it. The pages turned themselves. The words weren't written, they were etched in claw. And they told the truth. The Gauntlet wasn't a trial to choose a worthy leader. It was a cage, a ritual, a pact. Centuries ago, when the first Alpha rose from blood and betrayal, he was cursed by the Hollow to carry the weight of leadership, not just through strength, but through sacrifice. Every Alpha must create a Gauntlet before death. Every Gauntlet must claim 5 souls. Only then could the 6th ascend, not to rule, but to contain the curse. It was not a crown, it was a coffin. Ronan's hands trembled, his breath hitched. The Gauntlet didn't choose a king, it made a jailer. He was never meant to win, he was meant to survive, to carry it, forever. His father had known. That's why he'd banished Ronan, why he'd carved the spiral into his shoulder. He hadn't been protecting the pack, he'd been delaying the curse. The floor beneath him pulsed, then cracked. A scream echoed, high, sharp, and close. Leora, Ronan, turned and ran, the book crumbling behind him into ash. He found her slumped against a wall, blood soaking her side, claws out, face pale. She wasn't dying from wounds, she was fading from something else. She looked up at him, barely breathing. "You figured it out," she whispered. "Why did you come here?" he asked, voice low. "To win," she said. "But not for the crown, for the freedom. For a future." Her eyes closed. "I didn't know it needed a soul to finish." Ronan knelt beside her, but her body was already turning to mist, dissolving into the same red haze that lined the chamber walls. Another offering claimed for remain, but Ronan didn't move. The truth had weight now. He remembered Kane's words. "I'm not here to rule, I'm here to cleanse." If Kane reached the end, he would break the Gauntlet. He would destroy the ritual and take the curse with him into the world. Ronan stood, spine straightening, no more running. The blood moon pulsed above the Hollow. The final hunt had begun. The Hollow howled. Not wind, not wolves, the place itself. The stone shivered beneath Ronan's feet. The walls vibrated with a frequency just outside hearing, one that hit the bones first, then the heart, then the soul. 4 remained. and Cain was making sure that number dropped fast. In a corridor lined with skeletal remains, wolves, chained to the walls with silver barbed wire, Verathorn hide fought for her life. Cain had cornered her. Blood soaked his claws, his fur matted with fury. His eyes glowed, not gold, but black-red, a shade that pulsed in time with the moon. Vera was faster, smarter, but Cain was possessed. Not by a spirit, by belief. You think you're saving them? Vera snarled, ducking a slash that cleaved a silver pillar in half. You're just feeding the curse. Cain laughed, teeth bared. No, I'm ending it. He lunged. Their claws clashed with a sound like steel on stone. Vera raked his side deep, purposeful. Cain slammed her against the wall. Bones cracked. She gasped. He leaned in, breath hot. I kill them all. There's no sixth. No container. No alpha. Just freedom. Then he drove his claw into her heart. The chamber screamed with her, and the hollow took her body, blood, and soul into the stone. 3 remained. Ronan felt it. A ripple in his chest, like part of him had been torn loose. He stopped running, closed his eyes. The pack was dying. Not just bodies, not just names, the bond itself. He remembered what Vera once told him, years ago. The Alpha doesn't lead by fear. He leads by carrying the weight of those who can't. He opened his eyes. The path ahead split into 2. One reeked of ash, the other of rot and lightning. He chose lightning. Cain stalked through the spiral chamber now, dragging Vera's blood along the wall like a sigil. He was muttering, 5 down, 1 left. And I won't let the hollow win. Spirits stirred in the air, faces in smoke, old alphas with missing eyes, ghosts of wolves who had failed or won. They watched Cain. They didn't speak, but the sigils on the wall began to bleed. Cain didn't care. He roared, voice shaking the temple. Come on, Ronan. Come see what a real alpha looks like. And from the far corridor, Ronan emerged, but not alone. He was no longer just flesh and claw. The shrine's spiral had marked him. A glowing sigil pulsed on his chest, burned into his fur, into his blood. The spirits had chosen, not for glory, but for containment. Cain saw it, and he snarled, they picked you. You're the vessel. You'll rot like the rest of them. Ronan's voice was calm. They didn't choose me to win. They chose me to stop you. And then it began. 2 wolves, both transformed, both howling. They collided like gods at war. Fangs slashed fur, claws raked bone. The chamber cracked with every blow. Ronan fought with precision, grounded in memory and pain. Cain fought like a storm, wild, wrathful, unbound. They were equal in strength, but not in purpose. Ronan didn't fight to kill. He fought to end it, to end the cycle, to end the crown of rot passed from one survivor to the next. And as their final blow echoed through the gauntlet, lightning struck. From nowhere, every sigil lit up, every spirit screamed. The hollow itself split open. The strike of lightning did not come from the sky, it came from within the hollow itself. The stone walls split like ribs, cracked open by divine force. Roots tore down from the ceiling like grasping claws. Flame burst from the runes, spiraling in lines of ancient language no living wolf could read. Cain and Ronan were thrown apart by the blast bodies, flung like ragdolls against the temple walls. But they rose, broken, bleeding, still shifting, still fighting. Cain stumbled forward, jaw hanging at a crooked angle, one arm dragging behind him like dead weight. His other hand burned with red light, the same color that had flared from the first Alpha's mark. You think you're stopping this? He spat, blood foaming at his mouth. You're finishing it? Ronan stood straighter. The sigil on his chest blazed like a second sun. The spirits of past Alphas now hovered around him, not speaking, just watching, not judges, witnesses. There's nothing left to rule, Ronan said. The gauntlet was never about the strongest. It was about who could bear the weight. Cain laughed, a horrible rasping sound. Then, let's see if you can lift it, he charged. They collided again, teeth and bone. And fury. This time, slower, more deliberate. Each strike was the weight of history. Each blow was generations of blood and betrayal crashing into each other. Ronan took a claw to the side, deep enough to gut a bear. Cain took a fang to the throat, tearing skin but not silence. They rolled, clawing, snarling monsters made of pain and legacy. And then, Cain slipped. Ronan pinned him, clawed hand at his throat. Everything in him screamed to end it, to finish what the hollow demanded, but Ronan paused. The spirits leaned closer. "If I kill you," Ronan whispered, "I become it." He looked into Cain's wild, broken eyes. "And you were never meant to be free. Just like I was never meant to lead." Cain spat blood. "Then what the hell do you do, wolf?" Ronan closed his eyes. "I end it." He stood, stepped away, let Cain collapse in defeat, and with that act of mercy, the hollow shattered. The floor opened into blinding red light. The gauntlet howled, not in anger, but in release. The spirits howled back. One by one, they burst into smoke, ascending in spirals that danced through the stone and vanished into the cracks above. The shrine collapsed, the blood runes faded. The cycle had been broken, for the first time in centuries. There was no new alpha, only one survivor, one witness. Ronan stood alone, burned, marked, not crowned. The spiral sigil on his chest no longer glowed, but it scarred, not with power, with memory, behind him. Cain lay still alive, but broken. The hollow did not take him. That was mercy, or punishment. Time would decide. Ronan stepped through the rubble. The tunnel ahead had reopened. The first light of dawn filtered through the broken rock. He walked toward it, not to ascend, but to remember. The sky was gray with ash when Ronan emerged from the hollow. No wolves waited, no howls greeted him, only wind and silence. The stone altar where Darius Vaughn once stood was now cracked in half, split by the same lightning that had shattered the Gauntlet's curse. The blade, the obsidian, ceremonial fanglay, in pieces across the forest floor. Ronan limped toward the altar, each step slower than the last. Not from pain, but from knowing. The gauntlet had not crowned him. It had emptied him. He climbed the final steps, looked out over Grimridge Hollow, where smoke from spirit fire still curled from the ground like old breath. No pack remained. The survivors would return in time, perhaps, or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe the curse had run too deep, and the cost had been too high. He touched the spiral scar burned into his chest. It was cold now, but he knew it still watched. Not to torment, not to punish, just to remember, because memory was the only crown that never rusted. A gust of wind rolled through the hollow, picking up ashes like snow. Ronan turned his back on the altar, walked toward the woods. No throne awaited him. No glory, just trees, and the trail ahead. High above, the blood moon dimmed, and from somewhere deep in the hollow, unseen, a low guttural growl echoed beneath the roots. Not angry, not hungry, just patient. Waiting for the next fool who thought the gauntlet was finished. Because legends don't die, they wait, and the hollow always remembers. And for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlist. In the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.